my next question is around what are some innovative ways, strategies, tactics you have seen used or seen to address gender-based violence online? And it can also be ways in which we keep each other safe, right? What are some ways y'all are exploring keeping each other safe and or supporting on the ground work that's happening?
Yeah. You know, I think this comes back to like what Jelani had said of I think we get really bogged down in the negatives, and I'm sad that it's hard for me to think about ways that I can keep myself safe online. That but I mean I will say, you know, the tools that we can use are in front of us, right? Like it's naming the harms, it's having those conversations from an organizing standpoint. Calling out leaders in the tech space is a really great tool, right? Like naming the fact that Sheryl Sandberg claims to be a feminist, is COO of Facebook, is doing very well for herself, and is profiting off of the harms and violence threatened against Black and Brown people, specifically Black women. Like naming that and kind of engaging in those conversations, and you know, partnering, you know, working with us, like becoming members of our organizations is a great way, because then you can get looped in, you can participate in the Facebook strike, you can you know, participate in a tweet storm or in a Facebook storm or post storm or whatever, right? Like you can engage with us on that. You know, from the immediate, like what tools are available right now. I mean, you can turn off your comments if you don't want people to comment on your photos or things like that, right? I mean, I don't want to like promote that as a way, as a solution, because it feels like the moral equivalent of telling someone to wear a longer skirt so that they won't get catcalled. It's like, it's not going to work, but necessarily in the long term. But, you know, in the immediate, that's a tool. You can be private online, like you can do that, and that's okay. But at the same time, right, like, you shouldn't have to make those sacrifices in order to feel comfortable online. I don't know, Jelani, do you have better ideas? I feel like this is a hard question.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard question. Yeah, I think some of the strategy that I find that works the best, especially when we are trying to talk to people en masse about these issues, is really is like connecting the dots and breaking it down. And talking to folks in a way that just feels like I'm at a coffee shop and I'm talking to you. I think a lot of these, you know, tech issues that we are like so concerned about still get very jargony. They still get very like in the weeds. And so finding ways to really like pull it out, make it human, really like break down the concept and the issue as a strategy for addressing any sort of like bad thing that's happening on these tech platforms, but especially ones like gender-based violence that can become really complicated. So I find that, and then I think, you know, some of the work that has been really creative that I've seen also comes from like UltraViolet. Y'all put out the Hey Cheryl video, which it still cracks me up to this day, but I think is like really powerful of like finding the targets that make the most sense for your organizing. And in this case with Meta, if we're talking about gender-based violence, it makes sense to target Sheryl Sandberg, and really like speak to her as like, hey, you like are leadership here, and you also are kind of like representing women here, and so like what are you going to do to protect folks? And then yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of like a kind of like a side thing. There's a lot of like digital security stuff that folks can do on their own platforms and their internet presence that can help on a like individual everyday level. But as far as like systems change, we just keep working at it, and we keep trying to explain to people what's going on in a way that brings them in and activates them.
And the one thing I would also add is like learn how to discern what disinfo is and looks like. Like it's really hard to, especially the way in which like bad actors will create disinformation graphics and stuff. Now it's especially hard, or like articles. But take the time to really, read something and figure it out. Like, see if it is disinformation, and see if it is like targeting for you to like walk away with this very specific ideology or perspective. And read trusted news sources, right? Like read sources that can be trusted, and aren't necessarily, don't have an agenda behind them necessarily, I think is a good tool.